Hi guys, so we are on our last lesson for Learning Target 2A. Okay, so in this lesson we are going to construct equations given constraints. Okay, and we are dealing with word problems here. Okay, so we're going to walk ourselves through it. I know a lot of students get super nervous when it comes to word problems, right? But we just take it step by step, chunk by chunk, and we break it down. Okay, so I'm going to be using a lot of colors and highlighting, and I hope you do too. Okay, so I'm going to start by reading the word problem one time through. Okay, so number one here says a 555-mile, 5-hour plane trip was flown at 2 speeds. Okay. The first part of the trip, the average speed was 105 miles per hour. Then the tailwind picked up, and the remainder of the trip was flown at an average speed of 115 miles per hour. For how long did the plane fly at each speed? Okay, so this type of equation is a distance problem, okay, and it uses the formula d equals r times t. So I'm just going to write the formula here, d equals r times t, okay, or sometimes we just write it as d equals rt. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a table here to help me break down all of the information I have. Okay. So I'm going to label this D. This D stands for distance. Okay. This table I'm going to use R. This stands for rate. And this table here I'm going to write T. And this stands for time. Okay. In Algebra 1, I write my t's like this, so that way I know the difference between a t, the variable, the letter, versus a plus sign. Okay. So using our formula, d, distance, equals r, rate, times t, time. Okay. So from this, I know that I have 2 speeds. I know that I have a first part of the trip, so that's important. I know that I have a first part of the trip, and I know that I have a second part of the trip, right? The remainder part. Okay, right? So I'm going to label one part the first part. Okay. So this whole row would be about the first part. This is about the second part. Okay. And then the last part I'm going to put total. Okay, what we know about the whole trip. Okay. So here I know that we traveled 555 miles total. Okay, so that's a distance. So I'm going to put that here in my distance. Okay. So I'm just going to highlight that for us in pink so we know where that came from. Okay, so 555 miles. Okay. I also know that the trip took 5 hours. So this is a time. Okay. So I'm going to put that in the total time, right? So the whole trip took 5 hours. Okay, so I'm going to put that under T, time, for the total. Then, keep going on, the first part of the trip, I'm told that I have an average speed. This is a rate of 105 miles per hour. Okay, so this is the first part of the trip. Okay, the rate was 105 miles per hour. Okay, so I'm going to put that as rate under first part. It's going to be 105. Okay, and then I know that there was wind. And so for the rest of the trip, the second part, we flew at an average speed of 115 miles. And that was the second part of the trip. Okay, now we want to know how long the plane flew at each speed. Okay. So if I said that my first part was some d distance, some unknown distance, I know that the second part has to be 555 minus d, right? Because together they make 555, right? So if this is d, and I know my total was 555, the remainder, right, 555 minus d has to be the second part. Okay, and I could do the same thing for time. Okay, if the first part took some type of t time, and the total was 5, that means the second part has to be 5 hours, the total, minus whatever the first part was. Okay, and this rate thing we don't know. So I'm just going to kind of cross that out a little. Okay, so from this first row, my first part can be written as this. D equals my rate, which was 105, times my time, t. The second part was a distance of 555 minus d. Okay, so this is the distance for the second part, was a rate of 115 times a time that was 5 minus t. Okay. So this is the distance of my first part of the trip. This here is the distance of my second part of the trip. And if I know that the total distance was 555, I can do the first distance, 105t, plus the second distance, my pen's dying, 115, 5 minus t. Okay, so what this is the distance of the first part plus the distance of my second part equals my total distance, which I know is 555. Okay, now this should be pretty familiar to us. We can solve. Okay, so first thing when we solve equations is simplify, okay, by distributing or combining like terms. Okay, so 115 times 5 is 575. And 115 times a negative t is negative 115t. Everything that I didn't touch, I'm going to bring it down. Okay. Then, after distributing, now we're going to combine like terms. Okay, so like terms, this here, 105t and negative 115t are like terms. So I'm going to combine them. Okay, so 105t minus 115t is negative 10t. Okay. Everything else, the 575 I didn't touch. The 555 I didn't touch. I'm going to just bring that down. Then I'm going to subtract 575 because now I want to isolate t. So I'm going to get rid of this plus by subtracting. 555 minus 575 is negative 20. And this canceled out. Okay. Then all I have to do now is, because this is negative 10 times t, I get rid of it by dividing. Okay, and what I do to one side, I do to the other. This cancels. Negative 20 divided by negative 10 is 2. 2 equals t. Okay. Right, so I know that the time for my first part was 2 hours. Okay, but I need to find this time too, right? So I need to do 5 minus t, so since t is 2, 5 minus 2 is 3. Okay. So now that we have all this information, right, now that I know that this t equals 2 is here, and that the 5 minus t, or 5 minus 2 is 3, okay, I now have all my information. Okay, so how long did the plane fly at each speed? Okay, so the plane flew for 2 hours, at 105 miles per hour. So that was here and here. And it flew 3 hours, right, that's here, at 115 miles per hour. And that's from here. Okay? And that is my answer. I have now answered the question, how long the plane flew at each speed. Okay? So now let's do the second one. Okay? Very similar. Okay, so I'm going to read it once the first time, and then I'm going to break it up and put all my information in the table. Okay, so an executive, like a boss, drove from home at an average speed of 30 miles per hour. Okay, so here we already see a rate. Okay, and he drove from home to an airport where a helicopter was waiting. Then the executive boarded the helicopter and flew to the corporate offices at a speed, that's a rate again, of 60 miles per hour. We know the entire distance, that's D, was 150 miles, and the entire trip took 3 hours, that's a time. We want to find the distance from the airport to the corporate office. Okay, so I'm going to build my table, right, and put all the information I have here. Okay, so again, this is a question where it's distance equals rate times time. Okay. So I'm going to have D for distance, R for rate, and T for time. Okay. I know there's one part where he drove from home. Okay, so this, I'm going to put all the driving information. Okay. I also know afterward he flew by helicopter, so here I'm going to put the flying information. Okay. And then this last part is what we know total. Okay. So let's find all our information and break it down. Okay, so going through it again, drove from home. So this is the driving part at an average speed of 30 miles per hour. That is a rate. So that is 30. Right? So that information comes from knowing that we drove from home for 30 miles. Okay? Then afterwards, he was on a helicopter and it flew at a speed of 60 miles per hour. So that's a rate, and that's for flying on the helicopter. So I'm going to put that here. Then I know the entire distance, so this is D, was 150. So if it's entire, that means that's the total distance. Okay. So that was given to me here. Okay. And then we know the entire trip took 3 hours. So that's a time, so that's in the T column, and that's the entire, so total, 3 hours. Okay, so now let's fill in some other information and find our answer. Okay, so kind of similar to last time. Okay, this time we want to find the distance from the airport to the corporate office. So I'm going to make this D. Okay. So if the total was 150 and flying is a distance of D, that means the driving distance has to be 150, my total, minus the distance of flying. Okay. Right? And so I'm going to name this T. Okay. And since the total was 3 hours, if flying was a T part of it, then the driving time has to be the total minus my time flying. Okay. And then this part, we don't know. We don't need to figure out. So I'm just going to put a little dashed line. Okay, so similar to before. Okay, so here this top row tells me that my distance driving, okay, so this is the distance driving, 150 minus D, equals my rate of 30 miles per hour times my time of 3 minus t. Okay. My distance flying d equals my rate, which is 60 miles per hour, times the time, which I don't know, and it's t. Okay. So here, this is my distance driving, right? D equals R times T. So distance is rate times time. So this is my distance driving. This is my distance flying. Okay, so if I add the two distances together, I get my total distance, right? So my total distance is 150. If I add my distance driving, okay, this is my distance driving, plus my distance flying, I get my total distance. Okay, now it should be pretty familiar to us, right? So the first thing to do to solve an equation, we are going to distribute and combine like terms. Okay, so distribute. Okay, 30 times 3 is 90. 30 times negative t is negative 30t. Okay, everything else I don't touch, I drop down. Then we combine like terms. Okay, oftentimes I see that you guys forget that. After you distribute, you always combine like terms before you move anything to any side. Okay, so my like terms here are negative 30t and 60t. Okay, so I'm going to combine them. Negative 30t plus 60t gives me 30t, positive 30t. Everything else I'm going to drop. Right, so 90 plus 30t. Okay, after I've done combining like terms, then I move things over. Okay, so now, right, what is happening to t? It is being multiplied by 30 and added to 90. So I'm going to subtract 90. Okay, 150 minus 90 is 60. And then now, since this is 30 times t, I need to divide by 30. 60 divided by 30 is 2. So this t here is 2. Okay. Now, all I need is the distance flying, right? I want to know the distance from the airport to the corporate offices, and he got that through flying. So all I need to do is D equals my rate 60 times my time flying 2. Right? So 60 times 2 is 120. Okay? And that's the distance that I want, right? So the airport, right, is 120 miles from the corporate offices. And I know that because that's the distance he spent flying. Okay. Now we're going to try different types of problems. Okay, and the equation is slightly different. Okay, so here, number 3, it says, Miss Ng, that's me, signed up for a new travel credit card and received 100 bonus points upon signing up. Okay? She earns 2 points for every dollar she spends, and currently she has 184 points. Okay? How much money has Miss Ng spent? Okay? Normally for word problems, if I use a variable, I define the variable, which means I state what the variable means. Okay, so I'm going to use the variable x. Okay, that's just the one we normally use. It doesn't matter. You can pick a different letter if you want. Okay, so since I want to find out how much money I spent, x is going to be the money that Miss Ng spent. Okay. So this just helps me so that way when I solve for x, I know what it means, right? You've done it already in your previous assessments. Okay, this is just a more formal way of saying it now. Okay, so I know that my total was 184 points. Okay, this is what I end up with. So that's what I have in the end. Okay. So I know that currently I have 184 points. So that's my total right now. Okay, so how do I earn points? So according to this, I started off with 100 bonus points. Right, so I already have that to start with. Okay. And I also earn points for every dollar I spend. Okay. So since I get 2 points for every dollar I spend, I get 2 points for every dollar. And so since X is money, 2X tells me how many points I get based on the money I spend. Okay, so that's 2X. That comes from this information. 2 points for every dollar. That's 2 times the dollar, 2 times the money. Okay. I know I also got 100 bonus points. So in addition to the ones I earn, right, I already started off with 100, so I can add that in. Right. After that, right, it's pretty familiar to us. All we have to do is solve. Okay. So there's no distributing, there's no like terms, so now all I have to do is isolate. Okay, so I'm going to start by subtracting 100. Okay, 184 minus 100 is 84. 2x stays the same. The 100 minus 100 cancels to be 0, so it's 2x plus 0. Then, since this is 2 times x, all I have to do is divide by 2. 84 divided by 2 is 42. This 2 divided by 2 cancels out to be 1, so now I have 1x. Okay, so what does this mean now that I have x equals 42? So because x is the money Miss Ng spent, this tells you that Miss Ng has spent, that's a funny looking S, has spent $42. Okay, and that answers my question, right? I wanted to know how much money I spent. There you go, Miss Ng has spent $42. Okay, so now let's try the next one. Okay, so Andy is part of a rewards program at her local movie theater. Okay, when she signed up, they gave her 50 welcome points. Okay, so like 50 bonus points just for signing up. Okay. She gets 10 reward points for every movie she watches. Okay, so if she gets 1 movie, that's 10 reward points, 2 movies, that's 20 reward points, so on and so forth. Okay, and Andy currently has 160 points total. How many movies has Andy watched? Okay, so again, I'm going to define my variable. I'm going to use the letter X. Okay. Maybe you want to use M for movies, right? But I'm just going to use X, right? Because I'm boring like that. So X is the number of movies Andy watched. Okay? Since that's what we want to know, how many movies she watched, I'm going to use X to represent that. Okay, now let's break down what we know. Okay, so I know that Andy got 50 welcome points to start off with. Okay, so she already has 50 points before she even watches any movies. Okay, so that's part of her 160 that she has. Okay, the next thing I know is that she gets 10 reward points, okay, for every movie she watches, right? So again, if she watches 1 movie, she gets 10 points, 2 movies, 20 points, so on and so forth. Okay, and I know that right now her total is 160 points. All right, so let's break this all down. Okay, so we know she has 160 points total. Right, so that's what everything adds up to. It's going to add up to 160. Right? Okay, so how did she earn points? Okay, we know she gets points 10 for every movie she watches. So if we do 10 times the movie she watches, that's how we know how many points she gets from that, right? So that makes sense, right? If we do 1 movie watched, 10 times 1, 10 points she earned, right? 2 movies watched, 10 times 2, 20 points she earns, okay? And then we also know that she started off with 50 just for signing up. Okay, so let me just highlight the stuff we got from our words. Okay, and then we're going to solve. Okay, so pretty familiar to us, right? We started doing this on the second day, so we're good to go. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do to isolate x, get rid of this add 50 by subtracting 50. Okay, so 160 minus 50 is 110. Okay, then 10x stays the same, and then 50 minus 50 cancels out to be 0, so 10x plus 0. Then, to get x by itself, since this is 10 times x, I'm going to divide by 10. 110 divided by 10 is 11. 10 divided by 10 is 1, so now I have 1x. Okay, so what does this mean now that I have 11 equals x? So since x is the number of movies Andy watched, if x equals 11, that means Andy has watched 11 movies. Okay, and that's it for word problems, right? So I know it was a lot. So if you are confused, please rewatch the parts that you're confused about and ask questions, right? Type in your question that you have from this video. Okay, have a great day, guys. Bye.